Good morning and welcome back to News and Views right here on Salam Media. The time is 10 minutes before the top of the hour, and this hour of News and Views is proudly sponsored by Africa Muslims Agency. Africa Muslims Agency, a beacon of hope to communities for over 35 years in Africa and beyond. In a bit, we'll be focusing on an important issue concerning the Western Cape's education system. The Good Party is calling on the provincial government to reconsider its decision to cut teacher posts, warning that such cuts will disproportionately impact students in underprivileged communities. And despite the Western Cape's improved matric pass rate of 86.6%, the province lags behind the national average of 87.3%, and areas like Khayelitsha and Mitchell's Plain could see the largest loss of teaching staff. And joining us this morning is Brett Herron. He's Secretary General of the Good Party and a member of the Western Cape Parliament, and he will share his concerns about the potential consequences of this teacher cuts and what actions he believes the provincial government should be taking. Good morning, Brett, and thank you so much for joining us on Salam Media this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on.
The pleasure's all ours. I think first and foremost, we can start off with the Western Cape's government decision to cut teacher posts, and you are raising concerns about its impact. Can you explain a bit on how these cuts will affect the quality of education in the province, particularly for disadvantaged students and the disadvantaged schools, which are mainly in the townships and also some of the rural areas of the province?
So I think the starting point is to understand that the Western Cape Education MEC announced in August last year that his department would have a 3.8 billion rand shortfall, and over the next 3 years, and this would requires him to cut 2,407 teacher posts. So I think the starting point is to say that there is actually a funding shortage, because the department tabled a balanced budget in March 2024, which provided for an increase in the number of employees in the Department of the Western Cape Education. And suddenly, 4 months later, there's a really large 3.8 billion rand shortfall. So we think that there's something dishonest about this whole process. Either the budget that was tabled in March was dishonest, or the reasons being given for the teacher cuts in August, just 4 months after that budget was adopted, is dishonest. But if you look at where the teacher cuts are going to take place, they disproportionately affect the quintile 1, 2, and 3 schools, which are the poorest schools. And you would expect that the education department would be supporting the poorest schools, because those are the schools where parents are not themselves able to fund additional teachers. Whereas in the quintile 4 and 5 schools, which are the more affluent schools, for want of a better description, those parents pay school fees, and those school fees are often used to supplement the educator allocation in the school by adding privately funded teachers. So the cuts themselves, we think, are irrational and really a stupid political decision to make. But secondly, where those cuts are going to be implemented will affect the poorest schools disproportionately, where parents are not able themselves to fund additional teacher posts.
I want to touch a bit on that, the disparities across the province. You've highlighted, the disparity between the affluent areas like Claremont and also the poorer areas like Khayelitsha and Mitchell's Plain. How do you think these teacher cuts will further exacerbate that divide in educational opportunities between these two communities?
Well, the cuts, so I mean, we've highlighted, for example, that in Khayelitsha, 192 teachers posts will be cut, and in Mitchell's Plain, 142, I think, will be cut. And those are very large, densely populated areas with some of the most extreme poverty in our country, compared to Claremont and Constanta, where I think the one district or the one community has 3 teacher cuts and the other has 2. So what will happen is the education inequalities that persist from apartheid will continue to prevail. And those students and learners who attend those schools with the large amount of teacher cuts will find themselves in overcrowded classrooms with less attention from teachers, and their results and their future are certainly going to be affected by the manner in which these cuts are being implemented to entrench an apartheid mentality to education.
Mm, mm, mm. I want to touch a bit on education funding and the miscalculations in the province. Your party, Good, is calling for education funding to be made available as a conditional grant rather than being left to the province discretion. How do you think this change will address the current misallocation of funds?
So currently, every province receives what's called a provincial equitable share, in addition to conditional grants. The provincial equitable share is calculated for each province based on 5 or 6 factors. The 2 largest factors are the number of children that are attending schools in the province. That determines 27% of the allocation that a province receives, and the other large one is health. So when that money comes into the province's hands, the province is free to spend the money as they choose. So even though the education component of the provincial equitable share is calculated based on the need, which is based on the number of children in schools, provinces can spend the money as they please. And what has happened in the Western Cape Education Department, or the Western Cape budget, is they've taken 8 billion rand that is received to fund education, or received based on the number of children who are in schools, and they've used that 8 billion rand to fund other things that are discretionary and are not the core mandate of provincial governments. So if that money was to come to a province as a conditional grant, then the province would have no discretion to spend it on other things, and we wouldn't be facing this cut of 2,407 teachers.
Mm, mm, mm. Do you foresee any political challenges when it comes to convincing the Western Cape government to reverse its teacher cut decision? And does Good have any support in Parliament for this cause?
Well, I think the MEC mania has dug its heels in. Even when the finance MEC threw some lifelines at his department in the adjustment budget that was adopted in December 2024, so just a month ago, she freed up some additional funding for them. The MEC for Education is still determined to make teacher cuts. So I think there's a political leadership in the Department of Education in the Western Cape. But in the provincial parliament, the only party that is supporting the teacher cuts is the Democratic Alliance, and they have an outright majority. But certainly there's support for what Good is championing amongst all the opposition parties in the Western Cape Provincial Parliament.
All right, I think we're going to leave it on that note. That was Secretary General and member of the Western Cape Parliament, Mr. Brett Herron. Really appreciate you giving us your time this morning, and I will definitely be keeping in touch just to get the latest out of the Western Cape and just the educational sector and how the province is running it. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, News and Views continues after this.